Friends on YouTube and my Facebook business page. Welcome to the behind the scenes recording of the Self Employed Life podcast. This is your opportunity to, I don't know, maybe I'll flub it up, make some mistakes. This is where you get to see the real raw stuff before it's all cleaned up and looks and sounds really pretty for the podcast. But since the podcast won't be out for several weeks, this is your chance to get the first dibs on some awesome content. And definitely today, that is going to be the case. So let's do this. As self employed business owners, we just keep going and going. But I don't think any of us, myself included, are exempt from occasionally feeling stuck in a rut or drained of inspiration. Our guest today is going to help us not only reclaim our sources of inspiration, but end up feeling buoyant. Susie deVille is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs build wildly successful businesses by rediscovering their creativity and leveraging the power of their true nature. An author, coach, and entrepreneur who built and sold a highly profitable real estate firm, she has been researching innovation and creativity since 2005. She is the founder and CEO of the Innovation and Creativity Institute, and we're talking today about her first book, Buoyant: The Entrepreneur's Guide to Becoming Wildly Successful, Creative, and Free. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. So excited about it. Congratulations on this being your first book,
Thank
having
you.
been that road. That's a huge accomplishment. And your book is, having read it, it's largely about inspiration and very much, which I was really intrigued by, about inspiration for entrepreneurs. Intrigued by the title Buoyant. Like, why buoyant? And what does that mean to you? And why is it particularly important, do you think, this idea of being buoyant? Why is this particularly important for entrepreneurs?
Well, I was sitting out on my deck in the summer of 2020 when I was working on the book, and I was grappling with trying to figure out how to come up with a great title. And then it occurred to me that I really wanted something that captured my desired end feeling state for the reader. And I knew that when I set out on the book writing journey, that my passion for writing the book was to be able to reach back to those who were in the place that I was in several years ago and help bring them out and into a state of this delicious lightness of being, which to me is well summed up by the word buoyant. So I know a lot of entrepreneurs who perhaps are just getting started, or those who have been in the game for many years. We all go through cycles of burnout and being lost or being overwhelmed or filled with self doubt. So, this book is your path to get out of that place and into a state of flow and ease and buoyancy.
Yeah, and it really is a guidebook, which I love, with a lot of exercises. And I love, you're absolutely right. Like, to me, buoyant is the result of inspiration. Because I'm reading this thinking this book easily could have been titled Inspiration or something around that. But what you are laying out a path for is the result of inspiration, right?
Yes.
When you inspire, something has air, it lifts, right? And it
Yes.
becomes buoyant. And it's
Yes.
wonderfully titled for that reason. And I hope everybody really gets that. Like, it's the result of inspiration, which, as I said, none of us are immune from moments in our lives that are challenging. And I'm actually going to read a quote directly from the book because it's such a powerful quote. And honestly, there were so many really wonderful quotes. I probably will recite more quotes from your book than I normally do. But this says it a lot about it. So, your quote: "Here is the foundational truth of how to change everything in your business and life. By reclaiming and reconnecting with inspiration and your innate creativity, you bring resounding happiness back into your life and enjoy business success you thought was out of reach." I mean, honestly, Susie, it's a bold statement to say, here's the foundational truth. Like, boy, you're going right for it. So tell
Right.
us, right? But in order to say that, you've lived the life, you've taken the journey. So
Yes.
take us a little bit on your own journey. Tell us a little bit about your story, your challenges,
Yes.
and how you were able to actually get back to that foundational truth.
Well, I had what I lovingly refer to as my nuclear winter, which began when the markets crashed in 2008. And at that time, literally everything in my life imploded. My finances, my marriage, my health, everything just was ashes. And I had to, by uh, desperation and need to pull myself out of this state and out of these conditions, I had to find a way to move forward in the face of ridiculous amounts of uncertainty and fear. And what I discovered through a lot of research, and I had actually begun, thankfully, some very in depth research in 2005 and six in the worlds of innovation and creativity. So I knew I had glimpses of knowing that the keys were there, but I didn't know until I actually set out on the path out of pure need for survival, really, to bring in all of the information and resources that I needed to change my life and to change my business. So I began this process, this what I call a creative rebel's voyage of discovering what those elements are. And I learned through listening to Paulo Coelho talk about inspiration in a way that I had never heard anybody else speak of it. I had always thought about inspiration as the sort of classic light bulb over your head moment where you have this great epiphany and a great divine download. But that's not what Paulo Coelho is talking about. He's talking about literally breathing in, inspiring yourself with elements that bring you alive. And that's passion, putting yourself in front of beauty, having moments of solitude where you can actually hear yourself think, dropping into rest and renewal, and engaging in acts of creativity that sort of bring your back channels back online, being with people you love, all of those things. And so that was my first glimmer that there was a path to creativity and to agency and back to self trust that was the beginning, the lead domino of all of that
Yeah,
was
and so
inspiration.
what you talk about is effort, you know, I mean, which we don't associate sometimes with inspiration, right? We think inspiration, as you said, is the download coming from above. I always say
Yeah.
about it's like kind of like writing a book, as you know as well. It's like books don't get written by inspiration; they get written by the discipline to find the inspiration. It comes from the discipline of sitting down every afternoon or every morning and writing the book. That the
Yes.
inspiration comes, you know. So it's a certain amount of effort to it, and you know, I love that you. To me, honestly, you're doing one of the most greatest acts of generosities, which is you went through your nuclear winter, you lived the life, you unpacked how you got yourself out of it, and now all these years later, you're packaged it up nicely in a book and are putting it out for other people to. And it is nicely, by the way. The cover is beautiful.
Thank you.
But you're, you know, that's a huge act of generosity. You know, you actually defined the path that you went through and are able to put it out as a guidebook. You referred to, and I think this was such a relatable term. I'd like you to talk about it a little bit more.
Sure.
You referred to the stagnation zone. So, what do you, right? I mean, that's a really powerful term. And I think a lot of people kind of find themselves there. And I think it's helpful often to give something a term so they understand that there's an okayness with knowing that's where you're at. Like if you're in the stagnation zone. So, what is that?
Well, first, for anybody who feels as if they are in the quagmire right now, the stagnation zone, my first bit of oxygen to you is that it's temporary. It feels as if it's going to be forever, and that is absolutely not true. But a stagnation zone is what happens when we turn the valves off and we dry up all the tributaries that do feed our creativity. So that's through reaching for more work, believing that if we dial up discipline to the point of almost self-punishment, that we're going to be able to achieve our way out of this burnout or out of this state of confusion or out of this painfully stuck place. When in fact, it's more about connecting with desire, connecting with what you love, giving yourself love and compassion that helps bring you out of this state. And there are lots of different ways that you can do that. But one of the simple ways that I talk about in the book is what I call the 5 M's. And that is meditation, movement, making something, moments of inspired learning, and morning pages. And for those of you who know Julia Cameron's work, who wrote The Artist Way, morning pages are your 3 pages of writing in your journal every day. Those acts, those 5 little daily habits, are absolutely fantastic kindling to start to move you out of the stagnation zone and seat you right back into the powerful place of agency where you begin to connect with yourself, and therefore you begin to attract your ideal clients right to you.
100%. I love how you repeatedly from the book come back to the benefits in a business sense, and I think that's so important because, like, when I was writing the Self-Employed Life, I kind of coined the hashtag "woo woo in your wallet," uh, right? Because I can get down there and woo woo as anybody, and I like tangible benefits of it. Like, I
Yes.
like, at the end of the day, we're entrepreneurs, and I love that you kept doing that in the book as well. That, yeah, this is a woo woo book in a lot of ways, right?
Hmm.
But with the goal of doing that work so that you attract your ideal clients.
Yes.
Many times in the book, I was referred back to the idea that, you know, we can't kid ourselves that the energy that you're feeling in the inside isn't coming across to other people. And you need to clean up that energy. But I love what
Totally.
you're saying about the stagnation zone, that it's a state. It's a state that's temporary. It's a state of being
Yes.
for now, and it can feel. I do want to talk a little bit more about the 5 M's, because anybody that knows anything about my work knows that I'm a huge proponent of daily habits. And
Hmm.
like you, I'm very focused on the self-employed business owner, and I give them like 15 to 17 minutes of daily habits, because to ask a self-employed person for more time than that, they're not gonna do it.
Right.
Now, your 5 M's may take a little bit longer, but I think the important thing here is the the practice of it.
Yes.
Which brings me, before we get in, I do want to go into the 5 of them a little bit more, but it's occurring to me to ask you, because I have my own take on this. What do you think the benefit? Now, we talked about the benefit here is getting them out of the stagnation zone.
Hmm.
If you were to kind of get underneath that, like, what is, because so many people have a hard time sticking with daily habits.
I know.
Right. So, and hey, I admit to it too. I was with my students in the Self-Employed Business Institute last week, and I asked them, how many of you are all sticking to your daily habits? And few hands went up. And I said, you know what? Me neither. I'm kind of off the bandwagon right now because I've
Yeah.
been taking care of my mother for 3.5 months. Back on the bandwagon now. But I mean, it happens. So, what what's the real shift, do you think, that we see in our lives if we stick to the discipline of daily habits?
So, the key, in my opinion, is the power of accumulation that begins with making a promise to yourself and then keeping that promise to yourself. It is spooky how powerful that very simple concept is. And even if we just do one of the 5 M's until it becomes much more of an ingrained habit in our lives, we start to see the power of this building and rippling throughout our entire day, which then also gives us the motivation and the desire, because desire is going to pull us much more readily toward doing habits and rituals than discipline will ever do. So we start to get the desire to say, hey, I would like to have some more of that, please. Some more of this ease in my life, some more of this feeling good, some more of this feeling connected, and being able to access the power of my imagination and my ideas and my problem solving. I'm seeing how these things help me. So even if you are truly where I was, which if somebody had rolled out the 5 M's to me in 2008 and said, you need to devote a couple hours to this every day, I would have been completely mortified. So you can start literally with 5 minutes. That's all some days that I could have done. The other is the point that you brought up about caring for your mother. There are times in our lives where we have seasons of obligations that we cannot foresee. Things happen. So it does no service to us whatsoever to beat ourselves up if we get a little bit off track, but just to be convinced and devoted to the act of getting back on track when we can allow it back in, and know that the power is going to be there for us when we return to it.
Yeah, I love, 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 Susie, the power of accumulation. You're spot on. I actually have been trying to find some research to support my experiential theory. What I've seen in real life, in my own life, and others, with regards to daily habits. That to me, I said, look, set out to try to do your daily habits 7 days a week. Great, great objective. The reality is, you may not get to it every day, but what I have come to find is that there's some power of accumulation around 4 days a week.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, I can find no science to back me up on this as to date, but I feel like that's always been a tipping point that, you know what, I look at it as, if you're communicating with your universe, whatever that looks like to you, if you're putting in less than 4 days of effort, I feel like the universe is saying to you, you're just not trying hard enough. But you put in 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, the rewards come, and it is the power of accumulation. I love that you've put it in that sense. Of the 5 M's, the one that, and so much of the book is about this, is about the making something.
Yes.
And that, I have to say, Susie, that challenged me, because I'm thinking, whenever I'm on a podcast, if I'm a guest and say, what are your hobbies? I'm like, my hobby is like walking. Like, I'm reading your book and thinking, I actually had a doctor tell me once to get a vice. He said, start smoking. I mean, a doctor said, start smoking or something, smoking, drinking, like get a vice, because all I do is work. I'm not a workaholic, but I'm very focused on my work and my purpose. I think walking is my hobby, but you
Yes.
definitely have inspired me to, like, should I pick up sculpting? Should I pick up painting? Should I, go back to gardening, which I used to do a lot more of?
Oh, wow.
So let's talk about the making something. And I want to address kind of maybe an elephant in the room, is a lot of people, I have had a lot of, because I coach a lot of very logical thinking people, say they're not
Yes.
creative at all, right?
Yes.
I love your idea of creativity scars. And I think that actually gives reason to why a lot of people think they're not creative. So tell us more about
Yes.
creativity scars.
Well, I do want to make sure that credit is given to Brené Brown for that term. And she talks about these art shaming incidents that the vast majority of us have experienced during our young lives
Yeah.
that influence us powerfully to believe the lie that we're not creative, that we're not artists, and that this whole world is completely closed off to us. And generally, what happens is we have created something, and a peer or a teacher or a parent has made a comment about it not being great or it being actually terrible. And we then just believe at that moment that that's it. That's a game that we can't play. And what the research has shown is that the vast majority of people, and this is true with my clients, I have found this to be bear out with my own personal experience working with clients, people in their 40s and 50s who basically just closed that door when they were somewhere around 6, 7, or 8. And then when I appear on the scene and they come to me for help with setting business strategy or tripling their income or getting more clients or more consistency in their business, and I start talking about making something.
Well, what you and I know as coaches, what people ask for and what they really need are two different things.
Well,
Right?
it's both actually.
It is, yeah.
I'm a big fan of strategic thinking.
Mhm.
It is one of my, I mean, I love the puzzle solving aspect of strategic thinking. The challenge with us though is that we are so heavily into our left brain, our logical linear strategic minds, which I love. Again, I'm all about my strategic mind, but we forget that we have this power, this unbelievably um, resounding power of our creative minds, our right brain. And I know there's some people will say that it's not right brain, left brain, but those are the terms that most people understand. But what's happening is that those functions of our brain are happening in both hemispheres. But we tend to just lean into just one way of working, and then we tend to think, well, I'll just do 3 times of that and I will get the results that I'm looking for. Or I'll look to see what everybody else is doing and I'll just copy that, which is absolutely the wrong approach because we're not communicating to our audiences from the place within us that is aligned and empowered and clear. And when we just market from a place of more, no one can hear us above the noise in the marketplace. No one is going to believe us either, that what we're saying is actually something that we can deliver. They'll intuit that something is off. So when I appear on the scene with my journals and my sketching materials and my creativity supplies, clients are looking at me with what I call the sort of the throbbing vein in their forehead, saying, "This is not what I
Susie, I
hired
want
you
to make
for."
more money. Get out a sketchbook. Right?
Skip
Yeah,
all that creativity
exactly. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Show me how to make money. So it is a little bit of a process.
Yeah.
Making something does not have to be complicated. Literally 5 minutes doodling on a piece of paper with a marker counts. It could be, yes, you could take classes. You could go back to gardening. You could make some kind of a wonderful dish in your kitchen. But it does not have to be the classic things that we tend to associate with creativity, but it can also be those things. And I can tell you, when I started learning sketching and painting in 2015, I would have never known that I was capable of making what I make today. That was a shocker to me, because I was the child who, in second grade, when they said, "Draw this horse," my horse looked like a coffee table and everybody made fun of it. And I thought, well, that's it. I can't do it. So then when you learn these concepts and you bring it into your life in a regular way, not just I'll do art on a special occasion, but when you infuse it into your daily life, it changes literally everything, because it's not about what the end result of the act is. It's about what's happening to you when you are engaged in the act of making art. And it's
Yeah.
profoundly transformational.
Right. And it actually makes more sense when thinking of the term stagnation zone, right? I
Yeah.
mean, to me, a way out of a stagnation zone, it comes from some level of creativity. And I'll tell you, you really got me thinking. And I think maybe because I have been transitioning for a number of years now out of photography, where, think about it, 90% of my working day was spent in a creative mode. And over the last several years, I've had a lot of problems with chronic vertigo. And I'm talking about really bad
Oh,
vertigo. Like, it'll knock me, I always say, for about a month, a year, I have to live like I'm living on a cruise, right? Because it's really
wow.
bad vertigo. And, Western medicine had all their reasons for it, but I have to say that the person I believe the most was an acupuncturist I went to, who read my body to say, "Wow, you're an intense thinker, and everything's
Mm,
blocked right at your chest. Everything above your chest is not getting sufficient oxygen, and that's why you're getting vertigo." So he gets in there with his needles and does, I must refer to it as a bloodletting, because he puts all
yeah.
these needles in my scalp, and you're not supposed to bleed from acupuncture. I bleed profusely
Wow.
from all the needles on my scalp, and it's like a bloodletting. It's like a letting out of a valve, but it's the only thing that knocks the vertigo. It makes it really bad for 2 days, and then it's gone. Right? It's the only solution I've ever found for it. And I think
Wow.
he's a Native American gentleman, and I think he read it right. Right? It's a lightness created above the chest. So I have to believe, to your point, it's partly because of the off balance, lack of less creative, more thinking, less creativity. So what you're proposing is, by bringing more making something into your life, no matter how simple or complicated, it's balancing the thinking mind. That we're living in this information driven society. I think more and more of us need this than ever before.
1000%. And when I was in my nuclear winter, I refer to it as this time when I was like a headless horseman. And I literally was completely disconnected from my body. I went all up into my head to try to solve what was going on. And I was disconnected from my heart and my soul and my inner compass. And I was just furiously trying to figure out what to do. But when I reconnected body and soul and started to think in a very holistic way, then I could start to see. I was almost like a skier on top of a diamond run in the fog. I could still see where the moguls are, and I could just be very agile as I avoided any misfortune along the path. And so you get this acuity and agility through bringing in the creative aspects that we have routinely kept aside and considered to be, our culture considers it to be frivolous, that creativity or art making is, for kids or people who are retired, not for busy entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is such a disservice to all of
And
us.
I think a misnomer. I mean, I think, I'm often struck, and I've said this so many times here in the podcast. I'm often struck at how it seems like the right book comes along at the right time. And I'm a huge believer in collective consciousness. So I think a lot of
Yes.
people like you, authors, are vehicles for connecting with what the world needs at this time. And think about it, right? Here you are putting out a book about being buoyant, about inspiration, about making something exactly in a time in the world where, I mean, we are a thought driven society. We live in an information society. We use terms like thought leader. More people are probably living in their head now than probably maybe any time in history, right?
Mhm.
Less work with our hands, less creativity. Literally, most of our businesses are driven by thinking. So if there's ever a time that we need a return to making something, to art, I think you're pointing out something that is so important for people to get right now. And like I said, even for me, even for somebody who's been in the creative field most of my life, you've pointed out to me how currently that's off balance. I don't have as much making in my
Mhm.
life as I used to. So really cool thing. Um, let's talk a little bit about some of the other practices. I love this one, the 7-inch plate.
Yes.
Love that and totally get it. So explain the 7-inch plate.
So I was on a call with with one of my coaching clients, and she was describing to me the course of her day. And I was exhausted just listening to what she was telling me. And I totally get it. And she was literally trying to outrun anxiety and not feeling and thinking. She didn't wanna have certain kinds of monkey mind thoughts, and she didn't wanna have icky feelings that came about as a result of that, and so she just got up and ran literally from dawn to dusk, and as she was explaining to me what she was going through, I had this idea in my head, and I said, "I've got an idea. Let's pretend that the amount of energy that you typically have for going through a day is the equivalent of a 12 or a 14-inch plate. And what you're doing right now is loading it up. You're like a teenager at the buffet where you're just mounding up this plate with tasks and to-dos and things. But let's pretend like the energy that you have is only a 7-inch plate. And we're going to trick your mind into believing that that's all the amount of energy that you have. And therefore, you only can fill it up what you typically would do, which was with half the amount of tasks. So she said, "I'm totally down with this, very excited to try it." She was actually pretty desperate, and I understood it well because I have the same drive. I have the
Mhm.
very same drive in me. So when I came up with the idea in the moment, I was like, "Boy, I'm gonna try this myself,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna use it on myself." And it actually really works because you hold yourself back. Our achievement-oriented selves always want to do just one more thing before we stop for the day, or 3 more emails before we make dinner, or get through these piles before we go on vacation. It's always just 1 more, 3 more, I'm gonna have a stash of work here, few more tasks over there. And what we end up doing is leaving no room for all of the wonderful other things that we could possibly be doing, which fuel and fire up our inspiration and our creativity. But we're routinely exhausted. So having this ability to give yourself some white space in your calendar, some rivers of white space, places where there's no appointments, no to-dos, we tend to then settle into ourselves in a very different kind of way. We experience our bodies in a very different way. And so as we progress, we tend to see the power of, oh my gosh, I'm not in emergency mode 24 hours a day. I actually can think between meetings. I
Yeah.
have more access to what it is that powers my business and also powers my joy.
Yeah, I love the 7-inch plane. I actually had a yoga teacher say to me once, she got so fed up with my perfectionist nature and asking too many questions about how to do it right. Like, how do you do yoga right? Right? She got so tired of it once. She says, I want you to give yourself one day a week where you do everything at 50%. So I actually ended up calling it half-ass Thursdays. so so for the longest time on Thursdays, I did everything. I put everything 50% of effort into everything. But it was a really great learning lesson, honestly, and finding out that, God, I bet for most people listening, your 50% is probably most than other people's 100%. You probably
Totally.
can give yourself some slack here. So another quote from the book. As I said, you have some wonderful quotes in the book, and I love this. Consider your level of energy right now. Your energetic state usually reflects the amount of time you spend in your elemental waters. Love the term elemental waters. What do you mean by that?
So that is a nod to the poet David White, who explained this concept to me while he was sitting across from me in the Burren, which is on the western coast of Ireland. And when he started to explain elemental waters, I felt that I had an electric shock going through my body because I knew immediately that I was outside of my elemental waters
Mhm.
and I was desperate to get in them. And that is actually really those things that do bring us alive. What it is unique about what our hearts want and what our soul craves are the places where we feel at ease and in alignment. It's almost as if we are in a river of consciousness and we're heading downstream and we're in flow rather than dog paddling with this kind of grasping energy to do more, more, more. And we're not in a place that is in alignment with who we are. And we're not doing work that is in alignment with what we love. So, it is dropping in and being in flow and in ease and buoyant, being absolutely energized and alive with what you're doing, who you're with, and where you are.
Yeah, when I think of the term elemental waters and returning to that, as you say, it's and paying attention to your current energy right now. It's like it's important to understand what you need to return to, and what practices. I know uh, I just recently watched I think there are 5 episodes of the national parks on Netflix with Barack
Mhm,
Obama
mhm.
narrating. And honestly, uh, talk about returning to your elemental waters, I mean, just an opportunity to get so absorbed in the national parks of this world. And I found it like literally the cure from other Netflix things, right? Because I found that I loved inventing Anna and all the other things on Netflix, but I literally recognize it's like I need something more peaceful.
Yes.
It's wonderful to watch these studies or of people or what have you, but to me that even watching that felt like a return to elemental waters. I mean, I was shedding tears within the first 5 minutes because of the beauty of the world. I just was so instantly overwhelmed. I bet just, oh my gosh, it's almost like you had forgotten. That's what I think of when I
Yes.
read that quote in your book about elemental waters, is knowing what you need to return to and then allowing yourself to do it. You know, you and I share something I rarely have a chance to talk to somebody about. Is I came across this in your book, and it has been, I'd say, the greatest life lesson in my years. One of the most important lessons in entrepreneurship, and also one of the hardest things to explain or to get other people to understand. And it's, you refer to it loosely in the book and about relaxing our grip on our destinations.
Mm,
There's something, Susie. So I just wanted you and I talk about that together because it is truly one of the biggest life lessons I've experienced. And it's such a paradox. I actually refer to it as the goal paradox. It's such a
mhm.
paradox to being an entrepreneur because by nature, we can't help but set goals, and we need to set goals, and we need to have a direction. And there's a way in which we're going for it, and we're going at it aggressively, and we're going for these big things. to tell an entrepreneur, yes, and you need to loosen your grip on the destination
Right.
seems so contra.
Like,
But
no.
you and I have learned through our maturity, not just in years, but in experience of business, that actually is the answer. So talk a little bit more about relaxing our grip on our destinations.
So it's very easy to get caught up on the gerbil wheel of achievement because a lot of us, myself included, believe the lie that we don't just have intrinsic self worth, that we have to actually do something or achieve something or accomplish something in order to be granted value in the world. And that is the biggest trap and the most painful lie that I believe exists for entrepreneurs, especially those of us who really love checking things off lists and making our dreams come true. And there's nothing in the world wrong with making your dreams come true. It's fantastic. The difference and the key is, are you going for that goal because it is something that you feel joyfully connected to? Or are you going for that goal because you have a little edgy desire to bleach out defects or to embrace perfectionism or to land at some ethereal place where you think, finally, when I get there, I'll feel better or I'll be happy when I get this thing to happen in my business or I achieve this goal. So the trick is that we can actually go through the process of self improvement and achieving our goals and our dreams while loving where we are right now and loving ourselves right now and believing that we have worth, a priori worth from birth. We have worth. We don't have to achieve anything to get it. So, the goalposts that move are the ones that are fueled by the false beliefs that we don't have value unless we actually get another piece of paper or check another thing off the list. And so when we come back to ourselves though, and coming back circle to art making and to creating and to inspiring ourselves, we begin to what call chip away at this concrete that we're encased in that reveals the true self of us. And we stop getting so interested in achievement. We still have motivation and we still have drive and we still do things, but it's from a very different energetic state. And it's from a place of fun. It's from a place of silliness almost, a place of what's possible rather than this white knuckled, furrowed browed,
Yeah.
unhappy state.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's a reward in life and in business that when you get it, when you get that lesson, it is life changing. Like you really start seeing how you can, go for it with a loosened grip. And there's the
Yes.
classic, the phrase, I don't even know where it comes from, but that a clenched fist can't receive. Right.
Right.
To me, it's the best definition I've been able to give other people about what it means to loosen the grip. Like there's a way in which, we had to hold both. Life is full of paradoxes. And one of those paradoxes of entrepreneurship is go for it with a looser grip because it's the
Yes.
only way you'll actually be able to receive that which you're working so hard for. And it's
To-
it's right. You just know it when
Totally.
you've matured
Yes.
to there,
Yes.
not just in number of years, but in business. You know it when you've matured there. But it's a very hard thing for somebody to imagine that hasn't had the benefit of actually getting there yet. And I love that you're nudging that along. So love that. So before I let you go, though, we're going to do the rapid round
Mhm.
around the acronym of SELF. The S in SELF stands for sustainability. You have the five M's, but if you
Yes.
had to say, what's one daily habit you have that sustains you?
Well, the one M that I never, ever, ever not do is the morning pages. That is so key for me to be able to work in my journal, get everything out of my head, close it up, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, and again, with a tribute to Julia Cameron from The
Yes.
Artist's Way, and
Yes.
it's just I had a chance to interview her years ago, and truly one of the most moving things I've ever experienced in my life. Just a even over the podcast lines, her energy exudes. It's incredibly
Yes.
powerful. The E in self stands for elevate. What's one thing you suggest that we can do to elevate our business?
I really would love for people to understand that the true marketing elixir is you. And the quicker you come back home to yourself, to your elemental waters, the more rapidly you will connect with your ideal clients.
Love it. The L stands for let's go. What's one action step you would love for us all to take even today?
Let's say no to more productivity and instead lean into what you love and what brings you alive.
Awesome. The F stands for facing a challenge. With all that you've accomplished, what's a challenge you still face?
The capital R resistance that Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art is absolutely something that I wrestle with every single day. I am completely surprised that you don't graduate from this process, but I do wrestle with it, and I do have to make sure that I don't let a thought slip past my awareness unaddressed that's telling me to skip that today, or you don't have to have that time in your journal, or you don't need to play around with creating today. You can just blow all that off. So if I stay on track and committed to doing the 5 M's every day, then I have this ready access to my intuition and my imagination.
Awesome. Oh, well, so good, Susie. Thank you for writing your book. I think
Thank
I said it's
you.
it's the right book at the right time. We in a heavily thinking world, everybody operating out of their head. We need more buoyancy. So I love it. Tell everybody what's the best way to find out more about you and your book.
Yes, the easiest and most memorable way is to go to I met Susie, SUSIE.com. And from there, you can find all of my social channels. You can go into my website. You can pre-order the book, which is available now, and it's available for pre-order now. I should clarify that. So the book will come out in September.
Yeah.
But I would love for folks to visit me online and let's connect on social.
Fantastic. And of course, we'll have those links available as well on our show notes at jeffreyshaw.com/podcast. And as I've been mentioning lately, if you happen to be listening to this podcast in its traditional podcast form, know that we are also broadcasting them, live streaming them at the time that we're having the conversations, which is usually weeks before it's actually packaged up nicely as a podcast. So be sure to follow me, subscribe on YouTube or my Facebook business page, and you can catch these interviews as they're happening and get to see the faces of such lovely guests as I have the good fortune to interact with. So, Susie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
And remember, you might be in business for yourself, but you're not in business by yourself. Be your best self, be proud, and keep changing the world.